Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text number 32. We can begin by offering respects to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Bacharane, Nirvishesha Srinivadi, Askatyade Siddharana. The Canto 1 is known as Creation, and this is text number 32. Etat sam su shitam brahmams tapa traya chikitsitam yad ishvare bhagavati karma brahmani bhavitam. O Brahmana Vyasadeva, it is decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Sri Narada personally experienced that the most feasible and practical way to open the path of salvation, get relief from all miseries of life, is to hear submissively the transcendental activities of the Lord from the right and bona fide sources. This is the only remedial process. The entire material existence is full of miseries. Foolish people have manufactured out of their tiny brains many remedial measures, removing the threefold miseries pertaining to the body and mind, pertaining to the natural disturbances, and relation with other living beings. The whole world is struggling very hard to exist out of these miseries. But men do not know that without the sanction of the Lord, no plan or no remedial measure can actually bring about the desired peace and tranquility. The remedial measure to cure a patient by medical treatment is useless if it is not sanctioned by the Lord. Cross the river or the ocean by a suitable boat is no remedial measure if it is not sanctioned by the Lord. We should know for certain that the Lord is the ultimate sanctioning officer, and we must therefore dedicate our attempts to the mercy of the Lord for the ultimate success, or to get rid of the obstacles on the path of success. The Lord is all-pervading, all-powerful, omniscient, and omnipresent. He is the ultimate sanctioning agent of all good or bad effects. We should therefore learn to dedicate our activities unto the mercy of the Lord, accept him either as impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, this is the first point, that, as it says in the Bhagavatam by Prahlad Maharaj, Balasya Neha Sharnam Pitro Nishingha Nartasya Jagadam Udanvito Majito now. Nartasya Prativivir Ushat Sandrashesta Tadvido Twanu Dinam Tvam Upekshitana. That Balasya means the child. So the child, he, at least in a civilized society, the children are raised by the parents, and the parents protect the child. Balasya Neha Pitaro Nishingha. But sometimes we find that the child may not survive in spite of the care of the parents. Balasya Neha Sharanam Pitaro Nishingha. In spite of the fact that the parents are trying to give the child Sharanam, shelter, the child still succumbs to death. Nartasya Chaganam. The patient may be sick, he may have an expert doctor, he may have suitable medicine, but still the patient dies. Udanvito majito now. A boat may be very strong, suitable to cross the ocean, still it may sink. Nartasya, taptasya, chaganam utanviteshas, tadvido tvanuvidam, tvam upekshidhanam. So if Krishna desires that the child die, or the medicine be ineffective, or the boat will sink, then that's what will happen. But even if Krishna decides, let the child grow up, let the medicine cure the patient, let the boat cross the river or the ocean, still everyone dies anyhow. That's inevitable. So, one has to depend upon Krishna, either for material success, in the sense that someone may pray, let my child grow up, be protected, let the patient survive, let the boat cross the river. But that's up to Krishna whether it happens or not. And even if it happens, ultimately, one should pray, as Parikshit Maharaj prayed, that since I inevitably have to leave my body, let me at least take birth among devotees so I can continue on with my process of pure devotional service. That Krishna can also grant. After all, Krishna is in everyone's heart. Nadate kasitit papam, na papam sukritim vibhu, agyane navritam gyana, tena muyanti jantava. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. The embodied soul, however, is bewildered because of the ignorance which covers his real knowledge. In other words, Krishna is equal to everyone. He's ready to fulfill our desires according to what we deserve. In the material world, we may desire something for the protection of this body or for the protection of others' body, with the idea that unless we have a material body, it is not possible to perform pure devotional service. On the other hand, we should also desire that we make progress in spiritual life, either become a pure devotee in this life or in some future life. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't desire to go back to Godhead because pure devotional service is as good as going back to Godhead. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu desired, well, first he said, in order to desire what he desired, we had to have some qualification. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was lamenting that when he was chanting Hare Krishna, or he was taking the role of someone who was chanting Hare Krishna, and they didn't have any taste for the holy name. Maybe some of us sometimes have the experience that we're not overwhelmed with ecstasy every time we pick up our bead bag. We can hardly hold it in our hands because our hands are shivering with ecstasy, with the anticipation that we have the chance to chant the holy name. Sometimes it may appear as a very difficult task to even complete our rounds. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was wondering, why is it that I have trouble sometimes chanting the holy name with full ecstasy and bliss? So he said, Nam namakari bahuda nija sarva shaktis titrapitani mayata smaranena kalaha etadrishi kripa bhagavan mamapi durvadaivam idrisham ihadini nanuragaha. Nanuragaha, not rag. Why don't I have rag? Taste, enthusiasm for chanting. And then he answers the question, Trinadapi Sunichena, Turavi Sahishnana, Amadina, Madinena, Kirtiniyak Sadahari. That, well, our first disqualification that we have to try to develop is Trinad Api. That is some humility. Now, humility doesn't mean to simply fold our hands and tell everyone how humble I am, and everyone looks so effulgent and I look so morbid. Now, humility is born out of actual experience and knowledge. That knowledge means that, as it says, Vidyavanaya Sampane Brahmani Gavi Hastane Shuni Chaiva Swapakecha Pandita Samadarshanaha. That the learned sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with an equal vision the learned and gentle Brahman, the cow, the dog, and the dog eater and the elephant. So this may seem a very elevated state of consciousness, that when I see an elephant, I see an elephant. When I see a dog, I see a dog. When I see a cow, I see a cow. When I see a human being, I see a human being. And when I see a dog eater, I see a dog eater. But this is actually not such an advanced stage of consciousness. It is simply Brahman realization. It is not that we necessarily are situated in Brahman, but we at least have the knowledge that everyone is an eternal servant of Krishna. We may not see the soul within the body. We certainly may not see the super soul within the body, but at least we acknowledge and we accept that everyone is Krishna's servant. Chanaka Pandit says that that's a learned person. Matrivat paradareshu, paradwareshu lostravat, atmavat sarabhuteshu, yakpashyati sapanditaha. That a learned person, the reason why we are giving classes are twofold. One, to give us knowledge, to make us a learned devotees. And the other is to give us transcendental knowledge or appreciation for the process of pure devotional service, so that we can become fixed in that knowledge and at the same time experience transcendental awareness of Krishna, transcendental awareness of this world, transcendental awareness of our actual spiritual identity. But part of our knowledge is to give us material awareness. Material awareness means, as Krishna begins in Bhagavad Gita, he doesn't begin with pure devotional service. He tells Arjuna that Denos Minyata Dehe Kamaram Yovanam Jara. Tata Dahantara Praptir Diryas Tatra Namuyati. This is partially transcendental knowledge. It is transcendental knowledge, but it's not full transcendental knowledge. But it's something we have to accept, that my body and everyone else's body is changing, but no one is actually changing, because everyone is an eternal spiritual soul. So whatever body one is in, if it's utilizing Krishna's service, then one is under the spiritual energy, Daivi Prakriti Ashritya. And Krishna's service is not so difficult. To become a Mahatma is not so difficult. That men can become Mahatmas, women can become Mahatmas, even children can become Mahatmas. And what is a Mahatma? Mahatmanas tum mamparata, Daivi Prakritim Ashritya, Vijnananya Manaso, Gyatva Bhutidem Avyam. Those who are great souls, Maha-Atmas, great Atmas, souls, are under the protection of the divine energy because they're fully engaged in devotional service. And what are they doing? Satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantas shadridavrataha namaschantaniman mam bhaktya nituta upasate. They're always engaged in chanting Krishna's glories, endeavoring with determination to serve him, bowing down before him. They perpetually worship him with devotion. So we're trying to come under the internal energy, because we have a choice at every moment. Either we're under the internal energy of Krishna, the Daivi Prakriti, or we're under the external energy of Krishna. Or maybe we're under the internal energy partially, and we're still on the mental platform, or we have some misconceptions, or we're still working on somewhat under the false ego. So it's called mixed pure devotional service. But our aim of knowledge is to clarify why we should give up our material attachments, our material misconceptions, so that when we're performing devotional service, then we're more firmly situated in focusing our attention and giving our love to Krishna. That we're doing our service with more care, with more attention, with more steadiness, and with more enthusiasm. So why is it that we don't have, what is the obstacles for this enthusiasm, or let's say humility? Well, for one thing is that we think ourselves, we don't accept the fact that we're not the proprietor of other, or matrivat paradareshu. We're looking to enjoy in the material world. Generally, that means for men, they're looking to enjoy women, and women are looking to enjoy men. And of course, we're in Kali Yuga, where it's hard to say what people are trying to enjoy specifically. In any case, that spirit of enjoyment is there in everyone. Every conditioned soul has a spirit of enjoyment of trying to enjoy either a living body or even a dead body at times. But that spirit of enjoyment is there. And paradwareshu lostravat. And in order to enjoy in the material world, we need some, generally speaking, most people want to accumulate some material assets to make the enjoyment better. Nice house, nice food, nice clothing, prestige, whatever. But a learned person, they know that there's nothing to enjoy in the material world apart from Krishna consciousness. Although a certain amount of sense gratification is necessary so that we're not bothered by the senses. Just like, for instance, if we're eating a meal, in order to properly digest the meal, we need a certain amount of salt. So a certain amount of salt is required. Otherwise, the meal is tasteless, and we would still remain hungry. On the other hand, if we put too much salt on the food, then the food becomes also unedible. So to have the right amount of sense gratification, according to our situation, allows the mind to become peaceful so we can focus it on Krishna. On the other hand, paradwareshu atmavat sarvabhuteshu, to see all living entities as spiritual beings, just like I'm a spiritual being. That if I suffer these threefold miseries, I feel very unhappy, and therefore why should I inflict misery upon others? Well, if I'm unhappy, why should I inflict pain upon other living entities and make them feel unhappy? Because we're all spiritual beings, we're all Krishna's eternal servants, we're all part of the same spiritual family. So I should try to help my brothers and sisters, not put them into difficulty. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has advised us, Yari Deka Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh Amara Aga Guruhana Tare Desh. To put this into practice means that whoever I meet, I tell them about Krishna. Now, obviously, if we see Prabhupada's pastimes, Prabhupada was an expert, a perfect instrument of Lord Krishna. And therefore, he knew exactly what degree of transcendental knowledge and what degree of practical knowledge he gave both his disciples and people in general. Sometimes Prabhupada just gave people practical knowledge. As I mentioned before, one time Prabhupada was in his room and some ladies from one society where they practiced Mona, they judged everyone's spiritual advancement by how much they were silent. They were allowed to enter into Prabhupada's room and have his darshan, and Prabhupada sat there for 20 minutes to half an hour and didn't say anything. And all the ladies sat around saying nothing. And after they left the darshan, and they told Prabhupada's secretary that your spiritual master is a greatly advanced soul. He's an enlightened soul, because he didn't say anything. Now, Prabhupada was in direct contact with Krishna, therefore Krishna could tell him how to preach to different people under different circumstances. Obviously, every time someone entered into his room, he didn't simply sit there in silence, but he said what Krishna wanted those devotees to hear, or those persons to hear, told Prabhupada what to tell, what to say, and how to say it. So therefore, similarly, as Prabhupada is an example, we could see how to help people come to the platform of Krishna consciousness, either directly or indirectly. For instance, when Prabhupada was in 26 2nd Avenue and people used to come and visit him, he didn't immediately start telling them that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead, we can see that sometimes Prabhupada would just talk about his past, or the past of India, how there was, he said one guest, his name was Bruce, and Prabhupada started to talk about some, I believe, a leader of India whose name was Bruce. They used to have a Raj, they used to have some representative of the Queen in India, and they used to take charge of the country on behalf of the Queen, like a prime minister. And therefore there was one prime minister named Bruce, and Srila Prabhupada talked about this prime minister whose name was Bruce. In other words, Prabhupada tried to establish a relationship with people, and after establishing a relation with people, they were much more likely to hear from him and take it seriously. Later on, this devotee was initiated as Brahmananda. But it is not that throughout Prabhupada's preaching, he simply glorified mundane personalities, but he utilized this subject matter appropriately to attract people to hear about Krishna. Now, here, this is on the stage, Chanakya Pandit, when he says we should see everyone's wife, every lady except for our wife just be like our mother, or every man except for our husband to be like our son, or that we should see other people's property as garbage in the street. And he says we should see all living entities as like ourselves. It doesn't take some mystical vision to see that, just a little intelligence to understand that in every body there's a soul that's not changing, that makes the body alive, and that there's a body made out of the material elements. It doesn't take, just like I have a body made out of the material elements and I'm eternal, so everyone else is eternal too, and therefore act accordingly. This is called Trinad Api Sunichena, that there's a supreme God that's created this and is we're expansions of, and under his direction, we're put into different species of life. Currently, we have the human form of life, which affords us the opportunity to recognize God's existence, Krishna's existence, and the existence of the other living entities around us, and try to serve Krishna by treating others appropriately. Trinadapi sunichena turaravi sahishna. And therefore, we should learn some tolerance when we recognize other living entities as Krishna's servant, and they're the same as we are as the spiritual souls. And if we can understand how this universe, including the living entities within it, are working under Krishna's direction, then we can be tolerant. That at no moment, in no circumstance, that our experience is arbitrary or accidental. Everything is perfectly arranged by Krishna in order to encourage us, either directly or indirectly, to take his shelter. Material miseries are there to encourage us to take shelter of Krishna, to get out of the miseries of material existence. And the process of devotional service is also there to encourage us that this is the process by which we can most easily get out of the material miseries, by entering into another level of experience, namely the spiritual level of experience. Because on that level, no matter what's happening to this body, one is in a different level of consciousness. One's consciousness is on the spiritual platform where there's only bliss and constantly growing awareness of how wonderful Krishna and how wonderful everything else is. And therefore, even when this body that we're in is faced with different problems or sufferings, one, practically speaking, if one becomes an advanced devotee, one becomes unaware or unaffected by such problems. And even if we're not such an advanced devotee, as much as we focus our consciousness on Krishna and give our love to him, proportionally, we're able to tolerate with less and less difficulty. And therefore, we can appreciate the good qualities in others as being given by Krishna. And we can understand that personally, I have no qualification apart from whatever mercy is bestowed upon me by Krishna and his representatives, including we're given birth by certain parents who give us this body. We're, via past activities, under whatever good activities we've done in devotional service in the past, we've been given opportunities to do devotional service in the present by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And therefore, we don't take credit independently of the mercy of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra for whatever relative good or bad qualities I may have presently. So this is preliminary for engaging ourselves in pure devotional service. It is not sufficient to be humble or tolerant or appreciate others. We have to do something. And we do things because we have an objective. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, Kavitam Va, Jagadeesha Kamaye, Mama Janmani, Janmanishvare, Bhavatad Bhaktira Haitu Ki Twai. Ideally, we recognize Krishna as the enjoyer, as the controller, as the benefactor, our best friend. So this is transcendental. So that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted. He wanted to engage in Krishna's devotional service in the consciousness that nothing belongs to me, everything belongs to Krishna. It's not enough to say everything else except for what I have is garbage, but actually even what I have belongs to Krishna. It is not enough to say that even I don't try to enjoy anything except for my wife or my husband or whatever else I have. No, I'm supposed to use Krishna is the enjoyer of everything, even of my wife and husband and everything else I have. It's not enough to say that everyone is Krishna's as a soul, just like I am, no, everyone is Krishna's servant, and Krishna is the real benefactor of everyone. I'm simply can be an instrument for Krishna, and therefore, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada told our Srila Prabhupada, that preach in the West, and you'll do good for yourself, and you'll do good for others. So it is not simply we're the benefactor or the well-wisher of others, but we're actually being benefited by serving our Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra under the inspiration of the Super Soul in the heart. We're also being benefited by being an instrument. It's not that we're all merciful. Krishna is all merciful. And therefore, by his mercy and by the mercy of his representatives, we have an opportunity to engage in pure devotional service. But pure devotional service means that stop looking at other women or men, as Prabhupada told his newly initiated sannyasis one time, when they asked him, what is the sannyasi? What is his duty? So Prabhupada said, when you go to a householder's house, and then when you see, oh, this is a nice wife, this is a nice house, these are nice children, I could have had a nice wife, I could have had a nice house, I could have had nice children. In other words, don't lament. If one is in devotional service, absorbed in Krishna consciousness, then one will feel a higher taste. And if that is what sannyas is meant for, to focus the mind on Krishna and give one's love to Krishna. That, if that's properly done, then one will experience abhayam sattva samshuddhira jnana yoga vyavyastiti. Fearlessness, one will feel love for all living entities, one will feel love for Krishna and all living entities, and one will have transcendental realization of how everyone and everything is related to Krishna. So everyone is supposed to be a sannyasi in our movement. We're supposed to work on the sannyas platform. It is not that only the sannyasis are supposed to work on the sannyas platform. Everyone is supposed to recognize everything belongs to everyone in our society is being trained to at least recognize that everything is Krishna's property, that everything is meant for Krishna's service, and Krishna is our benefactor and well-wisher, and therefore whatever he gives us, like the chakora bird, he lives on rain. So he depends on the cloud. So the cloud gives him rain, he's very grateful, but sometimes the cloud may give him a thunderbolt, but he doesn't reject the cloud. You miserable clouds, you rotten clouds, I reject you all. So he has to accept when the cloud gives the rain, and he also accepts when the cloud gives the thunderbolt. Therefore, Nadanam, Krishna gives us wealth. He doesn't give us wealth. If he gives us wealth, we use it in his service. He doesn't give us wealth, whatever we have. He's given us whatever we need. As it says, there is enough in this world for everyone's need, but there's not enough for everyone's greed. Nadanam najanam nasindaram. So we don't need janam, we don't need any followers, because after all, whatever Krishna gives us, whoever we're instructing, we're simply acting as an instrument for our previous acharyas. We have nothing to tell anyone particularly, because we're not independent of Krishna and our acharyas. So we have, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada said when he was asked, how many disciples do you have? This time he had thousands of disciples. So when he was asked that, at least under those circumstances, he said, I have 4. So the person, the devotee who asked him, said, don't you have more? I think you have more disciples, don't you? He said, no, actually, I only have 4. He said, really? He said, who are your 4 disciples? He said, my 4 disciples are my 2 hands and legs, because they're the only ones who seem to listen to me. So one should not hanker after followers or beautiful women or handsome men or opulent men, nor wealth, nor even liberation. These are all contaminations that prevent us from pure devotional service. Pure devotional service means devoid of karma and yoga. Karma means we're interested or hankering for something either consciously or unconsciously. Luckily, we don't know all the material desires we have because we'd be overwhelmed. We usually have 1 or 2 that we become conscious of, and we can work with those to engage them in Krishna's service. And the desire for knowledge outside of utilizing it in Krishna's service is usually to get free from our miseries of material existence. How to win friends and influence people is also knowledge. Win friends so they can give us what we want, protect our bodies, make our mind feel good, tell us how to avoid problems, make friends, and influence people so I can get what I want in this world. So knowledge outside of how to engage with more care and attention in Krishna's service is usually either directly or indirectly looking for some kind of liberation from the material miseries that we're facing. Pure devotional service is devoid of these 2 desires because one is satisfied with pure devotional service. One is satisfied with experiencing Krishna, remembering Krishna, and serving Krishna. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Mama Janmani Janmani Tre, Bhavatad Bhaktya Haitu Kitve. Simply, I want pure devotional service, even if it means life after life. It doesn't really matter if it's life after life. Simply, I want to absorb my mind more and more in Krishna and engage my body more and more in his service. Just like Parikshit Maharaj sitting on the bank of the Ganges, cursed to die within 7 days, getting all kinds of suggestions from the great sages and demigods who were assembled there, asking, what is the duty of a person who's about to die? By the way, I'm giving this class, but we all have the same destiny. We're all about to die. Sorry for the bad news. Class can't all be positive. We're all about to leave our body either today and 50 years from now. Luckily, because we're Krishna servants, we'll get another chance to engage in his service, even if we don't become perfect. So that's what Parikshit Maharaj, ultimately, he was praying that let me take birth again, but let me take birth in a family of devotees so I can go on with my devotional service. That's my only wish. Let all of you go on chanting the glories of the Lord. And if I leave my body, please give me the benediction that I can take birth amongst the devotees and continue on with my devotional service. Then we can become eligible to seek shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. So we have to find out what to engage in devotional service. All of us have a material body, and from birth we've been trained what to do with this body to get dhanam, wealth, janam, followers, sundarim, intimate relationships with others, either female or male, how to get rid of the threefold miseries. We've all been trained up like that since time immemorial. But now we have to see how to utilize this present body, how to utilize our present words, our present existence in Krishna's service. So that will be explained in the following. It doesn't matter what one is. So that's good. everyone can engage in Krishna service. This is Krishna's direction, Bhagavad Gita. Man, woman, Sudra, Vaishya, everyone can engage in Krishna service. So how to engage in his service? One must dedicate everything to the service of the Lord. Okay. How do I do that? If one is a learned scholar, scientist, philosopher, poet, etc., then he should employ his learning to establish the supremacy of the Lord. Try to study the energy of the Lord in every sphere of life. Do not decry him, try to become like him or take his position simply by a fragmental accumulation of knowledge. So this is the problem of being in the mode of goodness, having more knowledge than others, then one thinks oneself to be superior, that I'm the deliverer. As I said, in the mode of ignorance, we think ourselves to be the controller. In the mode of passion, we think ourselves to be the enjoyers. And in the mode of goodness, we think ourselves to be the deliverers. Either we're delivering our children, we're delivering our wife, we're delivering our disciples, but with such an attitude, we can't even deliver ourselves. That Krishna is the deliverer. He's the one who can utilize us as an instrument, who can direct us to serve his devotee or devotees, and therefore become eligible for liberation, and help others also become eligible for liberation. But as soon as we think ourselves, our knowledge independent of Krishna, as if our realizations or our knowledge are somehow or another coming from ourselves, and we deserve credit for them, and then we're captured by the illusory energy. And instead of being a servant of Krishna, subtly or grossly, we become his competitor. If one is an administrator, statesman, warrior, politician, etc., then one should try to establish the Lord's supremacy in statesmanship. Fight for the cause of the Lord as Sri Arjuna did. In the beginning, Sri Arjuna, the great fighter, declined to fight, but when he was convinced by the Lord that the fighting was necessary, Sri Arjuna changed his decision and fought for his cause. So, as I said, it is not only thinking ourselves to be the deliverer that gets us in trouble, but also think ourselves to be the enjoyer. Arjuna did not want to fight in the battlefield Kurukshetra because he was afraid he was not going to enjoy the results of the fight. If he killed his relatives, then he was not going to be happy. Just like people don't care, even if they go to hell, as long as their relatives are with them. As long as they're with their family members and they're trying to enjoy together, even in hell. As that story goes that we've heard many times. One man was told by one priest that if you drink alcohol, then you're going to go to hell. So the man told the priest, but my father drinks alcohol. Well, he's going to go to hell also. But my mother drinks alcohol. Well, she's also going to go to hell. But all my brothers and sisters, they all drink alcohol. Well, they're also going to go to hell. But all my friends drink alcohol. Well, they're also going to go to hell. So the man's conclusion was, well, if my mother, my father, my sisters and brothers, all my friends drink alcohol and go to hell, well, if I'm in hell with all of them, then hell is heaven. So Arjuna did not want to fight because he was afraid that he would not be happy if he slayed his relatives. But Krishna gave him another perspective, that unless he fought for Krishna, unless he did what Krishna wanted,
Если он не будет делать то, что хотел,
neither his relatives nor himself would ever be happy without serving Krishna. So therefore he changed his determination, took shelter of Krishna, and he fought for to fulfill Krishna's desires rather than his own material desires. And similarly, if one is a businessman, an industrialist, an agriculturalist, etc., then one should spend his hard-earned money for the cause of the Lord. Think always that the money which is accumulated is the wealth of the Lord. Wealth is considered to be the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, and the Lord is Narayan, or the husband of Lakshmi. Try to engage Lakshmi in the service of Lord Narayan and be happy. That is a way to realize the Lord in every sphere of life. So again, this is the next stage. Businessman, agriculturist, whatever. They're generally considered to be in the lower stages of life. Often a businessman will think that this hard-earned wealth is mine and I should enjoy it. But this idea of I and mine, this is in the mode of ignorance because everything belongs to Krishna. Therefore, if a businessman, an agriculturist, whatever, agrees with that, then he can become Krishna conscious. Now, Prabhupada writes, that is the way to realize the Lord in every sphere of life. Everyone should recognize Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the best friend, and all we can do become is his instrument. The best thing is, after all, to get relief from all material activities and engage oneself completely in hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. When one transcends, when one properly utilizes one's activities in Krishna's service, then one will become transcendental by becoming absorbed in Krishna's service. A Vaishya can become transcendental by dedicating all his energies in Krishna's service. A businessman can become transcendental by, or an agriculturist, by dedicating everything in Krishna's service. Similarly, an administrator can become transcendental and absorbed in Krishna consciousness by the same. And a preacher also, all of them are equally eligible if they dedicate everything in Krishna's service to always remember Krishna and never forget him. The best thing, after all, is to get relief from all material activities, engage oneself completely in hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. But in the case of the absence of such an opportunity, one should try to engage in the service of the Lord, everything for which one has specific attraction. That is a way of peace and prosperity. We have to find our place in the Sankirtan movement. Obviously, for the most of us, we don't have an opportunity to act as an administrator over a kingdom or to perform fire sacrifices as Brahmins, or rarely the devotees nowadays are even protecting the cow and the bull. But we can engage in the Sankirtan movement by using our resources, if that's what we have, and engaging them, giving them to the administrators who organize the Sankirtan movement so the glories of Krishna can be distributed, so that there can be a cultural revolution where people can utilize their art, their music, their theater, their dance, the distribution of transcendental literature to convince people that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that everyone becomes encouraged to utilize their resources also in Krishna's service in this transcendental cultural revolution. One should not think for a moment that the realization of Narada was a childish imagination only. It is not like that. It is so realized by the expert and erudite scholars. And that is the real import of the word samsushitam. Although it would be ideal if we were living in a Vedic culture, which we're not. But in the absence of such a culture where we have a Varna and Ashram system, which is the most sane system for living in the material world, in the absence of that, we simply try to engage in spreading the Sankirtan movement to the best of our ability. Everyone has some wealth, everyone has some ability to organize. We can't organize a Harinam to go out. At least we can organize in our house, hopefully, that we can sit down with our family morning and evening and chant Hare Krishna together. Even if we can begin 5 minutes a day, we won't die if we do that, I guarantee you. And even if we did die, it would be a auspicious death. We can sit down and hear Srimad Bhagavatam for 5 minutes or whatever, Bhagavad Gita, offer something to the deities, a leaf, a flower, some fruit, or some water. So everyone has some resources to engage in Krishna's service, some ability to organize, at least in our own homes, Krishna's service, the Sankirtan movement. And everyone can at least, we know how to read, so even if we have nothing to say about Krishna, we can hear from the great sages, the great devotees, something about Krishna. They're simply picking up the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and reading it and discussing it, at least with our family. And if we don't have a family, then we can talk to our dog. He may not understand, but if he'll hear the transcendental sound vibration, and he'll benefit. And when we see the dog smiling, we'll also understand that this is also beneficial for us. So everyone, whatever our circumstances are, we can engage these things in Krishna's service and therefore benefit ourselves and benefit others. So I'll just read this verse again. Etat samsushitam brahmams tapatraya chikisitam yet ishvare bhagavati karma brahmani bhavitam. O Brahman of Vyasadeva, is decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. Inevitably, society is going to collapse because that's how the laws of material nature work. But when it's going to collapse, I have no idea. But it's collapsing already. In the meantime, we should chant Hare Krishna, offer prasadam, because we still have an opportunity to get something to offer. And if everything runs out in the stores, at least we can climb a tree. If it's autumn, we can pick up the leaves from the ground and offer them. And if it's not autumn, we can get good exercise, at least by climbing trees, getting some leaves from the trees to offer to Krishna. Luckily, so far, things have not come to that point, and therefore we can more or less get our resources, what's necessary. And we should engage in these opportunities in Krishna service somehow or another, even to whatever extent we can. And if we sit down with our families or with our friends, or we try to engage more extensively in Krishna service, then Krishna will be pleased and will reciprocate with us and give us intelligence how to organize our lives and our resources, and how to discuss Krishna even more sweetly with others, so that we become more and more encouraged to engage in Krishna's service under the present circumstances, whatever they may be for us. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? So there's a lot of things in the chat here. Let's see what the chat says. Okay, it doesn't say anything. Any questions?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Is that Indira? Who's asking the question?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Oh, we have
Thank
a
you
hand.
for...
You're second, Malati. We asked
Okay, sorry.
Indira.
Харе Кришна, слышно меня? Харе Кришна. Шрила Гурудев, скажите, пожалуйста, вот вы упомянули Господа Чайтанью и вот это настроение, что желание служить жизнь за жизнью. Мы часто слышим также, что вернуться в духовный мир за одну жизнь. Это примерно одно и то же, вот как бы достичь преданного служения и возвращения в духовный мир. Можно считать, что это как бы равные цели, или вот на что следует ориентироваться? Спасибо.
Спасибо. Lavangalata Devidasi, do you want to translate?
Yeah. Hare Krishna, I'm here. I will translate for the English-speaking audience. So, Maharaj, you have said, and especially put an accent on the Lord Chaitanya's mood of life after life of devotional service. Do we equate reaching the point of devotional service and going back to Godhead? Is that considered to be the same?
Yes, they're exactly the same.
Да,
There's
это одно и то
no
же.
difference. And one is actually in Krishna consciousness, one is already back to the spiritual world. Gop Kumara in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, sometimes he comes to Gokula Vrindavan and performs devotional service there. And sometimes he lives in Gokula Vrindavan, Goloka Vrindavan, and serves Krishna there, or maybe simultaneously he does both. But he doesn't see any difference between Gokul Vrindavan, the Vrindavan on this planet, and Goloka Vrindavan. They're both the same. Similarly, when we're absorbed in remembering Krishna's pastimes, then we're actually with Krishna in the spiritual world. Just like sometimes Krishna apparently leaves Vrindavan, even in the spiritual world, and in this world also. When Krishna manifests his pastimes here, sometimes apparently he leaves Vrindavan, but he never leaves Vrindavan. He's there in his bhava form, in his ecstatic form. So when we remember Krishna like the gopis do, with feelings of separation, then we're directly associating with Krishna in the most intimate way. That's even better it's as good, at least, if not better, than to be in the spiritual world with Krishna. Of course, if Krishna wants us to go back to the spiritual world, we're not going to protest. If he wants us to join his pastimes in some universe, except for Prahlad Maharaj, he prayed, let me stay here and deliver the conditioned souls. That I'm only unhappy to see souls suffering in this world, and therefore I'm making plans to deliver them. But we leave it up to Krishna where we go. But if we're fully in Krishna consciousness, then there's no material miseries, there's no material existence. As it says, Ananda, that at the stage of perfection of prema, then there is the happiness of prema is so great, the bliss is so intense and great, that one does not even perceive there's such a thing as material existence anymore. We're living in the spiritual existence at that stage. Yes, Malati Devi Dasi. Are you still there?
Yes, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much for the nice lecture. I was wondering, you spoke about pure devotional service. What makes it pure devotional service? Is it the intention that should be pure, or it's the consciousness?
Both.
Both.
We're learning how to perform pure devotional service.
Mm-hmm.
And we, as it says in the Nectar of Devotion, that there are 5 powerful processes that bring us to the stage of bhava. Even if we're a neophyte, we can experience bhava. Namely, chanting the holy names, serving the deities, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, serving the devotees, and trying to make the atmosphere spiritual, especially by preaching, either to our family or to engaging in pure devotional service with others and making the atmosphere spiritual. that as much as we concentrate our attention on these activities and do it with feeling and love, come in, and then Krishna reciprocates and reveals himself to us when we experience ecstasy or love.
Mm.
So there's no barrier to becoming, or as Prabhupada writes, one could become Krishna conscious in a moment, but not after millions of years. It's only a question of understanding and accepting the fact. So when we accept the fact that I'm Krishna's servant, and I should concentrate my mind on especially one of these 5 powerful processes with love and attention, then we make great progress in being on that spiritual platform and actually performing pure devotional service. And when we stop doing these 5 practices or the 9 processes of devotional service and get involved in other activities, then we come under the influence of the external energy more. And if we perform these 5 powerful processes or any of the 9 processes, pure devotional service, with not so much attention and love, then we proportionally experience Krishna consciousness with a little bit of material consciousness too.
Mm.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj.
I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.